Trump press secretary Karoline Leavitt was giving full-blown creepy North Korea vibes in what was probably her most unhinged White House press briefing to date, discussing Donald Trump's disastrous tariff policy and confirming that 104% tariffs will be imposed by the United States on China, the world's second biggest economy, radically escalating an unnecessary and potentially costly trade war. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we've got several clips to play, so let's jump on in. Two back-to-back clips of Karoline Leavitt confirming that the trade war with China is indeed escalating.
Karoline, on the president's threat yesterday on social media to increase tariffs against China by an additional 50% in response to their retaliation, has he signed anything in terms of an executive order, any documentation around that? Will that additional 50% go into effect tomorrow?
They will be going into effect at 12:01 a.m. tonight, so effectively tomorrow, yes.
Work on that today?
Yep, that's not good. That's not good at all. And another reporter effectively asked her a similar question, and she doubles down.
Ed, go ahead. As promised.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned the 70 countries or so. I'm curious, though, under what conditions at this point would President Trump talk to President Xi about tariffs?
Look, I just spoke to the president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that Xi and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
So, again, remember, this whole idea was predicated. Trump imposed a 34% tariff on China. And again, be very clear, China is in many ways a nefarious trade partner. There's no doubt about it, particularly with respect to the theft of American intellectual property. China has its issues, and there's nothing wrong, in theory at all, with a Republican or Democratic government attempting to impose sanctions or impose consequences on China. But a sweeping 34% tariff on all goods from the world's second biggest economy, that's insane. In response to this, China imposed its own retaliatory 35% tariffs on all American goods. And that's what prompted Trump to do what he did here. If you don't take away those 35% retaliatory tariffs, we're going to impose 104% tariffs on you. China didn't blink. They didn't blink when they imposed their tariffs in the first place. They didn't blink in terms of the deadline that Trump imposed on this. And so is it possible that Xi Jinping will back down? I suppose, but he hasn't yet. So I don't know where the confidence comes from. But here we go. Some more unhinged stuff from this White House press briefing.
So President Trump has designated Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization and deported its members while also moving to restrict Venezuela's oil exports. Is the administration preparing additional military or economic actions against Venezuela and the Maduro regime? And my second question is about Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Is the administration have a comment on her decision to go with the liberals and go actually with the Tren de Araguas? This is the same justice that actually sided against January 6th hostages last year. So is the administration have a comment? Are they disappointed in Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett?
So that reporter is also unhinged and very North Korea style. This idea that, the violent January 6th insurrectionists, they're hostages. Well, no, they were violent insurrectionists who attempted to overthrow a free and fair election to keep Donald Trump in power unlawfully. If those same people had done something similar on January 6, 2025, to keep Vice President Harris or President Biden in power, you would not be saying the same sort of thing. You're just an unprincipled, hypocritical loser who should be made fun of for the rest of your life. But also the question about Justice Barrett, Amy Coney Barrett, a Trump appointee, the fact that she has sided occasionally with the more liberal justices has provoked extraordinary wrath among the MAGA base. How dare you? Donald Trump appointed you. You are supposed to bend the knee to the leader. Really weird and cultish. We'll see how Karoline Leavitt answers.
To your first question, I don't have any actions to read out in terms of Venezuela. The president has imposed secondary tariffs on the Maduro regime and on Venezuela in the form of oil, which is obviously going to have a crippling effect on the Maduro regime, and that's the intended effect of this administration. As for the justice you mentioned, as for the Supreme Court, we've made our feelings very clear. We believe this.
So in some ways, it seemed like that question was even more unhinged than what Karoline Leavitt was prepared for. Like, oh, well, that's kind of weird. But again, this is the sort of person that they're inviting into the White House to give these sorts of fawning, cultish questions. President Biden's White House never did that with MSNBC, Pondering Politics, David Pakman, Luke Beasley, Adam Mockler, Midas Touch. They didn't, accept more liberal or progressive podcasters or people in to ask softball questions. But the Trump administration is doing it, and the crazy people that they're attracting are truly unhinged. Again, here's another clip.
I do just want to point out one thing, that the president, everybody in Washington, whether they want to admit it or not, knows that this president is right when it comes to tariffs and when it comes to trade. In fact, Democrats have long said that the United States of America has been ripped off by the countries around the world. They just don't want to admit it now because it's President Trump who has.
No, I don't think that Democrats are rejecting the idea that some countries have ripped America off. Again, China has done so with its theft of intellectual property. There's no question about it. But Democrats don't support widespread universal tariffs on any country, let alone the rest of the world. That's unhinged, and that's a distinction with a difference that actually matters. That's a meaningful difference. So again, a really stupid comment by Karoline Leavitt there. But also know what she says. Everybody knows that Donald Trump is right about this, and he's amazing and perfect, and everybody knows it even if they don't want to admit it to themselves. That's kind of the creepy North Korea bullshit vibes that we're getting from her. Here's another clip.
One being, can you explain the White House's evolution from this is not a negotiation on tariffs to countries should pitch us and start negotiations on
Sure.
tariffs?
As the president said yesterday, Jasmine, both things can be true at the same time. And it is a non-negotiable position that the United States has faced a national security and economic crisis because of the unfair trade practices by countries around the world. As for the president, I have maintained this position. The entire administration has always said that President Trump is willing to pick up the phone and talk.
No, these things are mutually exclusive. If you say the tariffs are non-negotiable and not supposed to be used for negotiation, but you invite people to negotiate with you, these are mutually exclusive. A thing that's non-negotiable can't be negotiated. And if you're inviting people to negotiate with you, then by definition, it's subject to negotiation. Again, this is what I mean, the bullshit North Korea style approach where she just listen, this thing is both a square and it is circular. It's a circular square, guys. Well, there's nothing, these things can be true at the same time. No, some things are mutually exclusive by definition. And, but again, this is the sort of like mental gymnastics that people like Karoline Leavitt and MAGA cultists like her and Donald Trump have to engage in all the time in order to compensate for Donald Trump's incoherence and inconsistency. Here's another clip.
Elena.
Hi, Caroline. It's clear the president has gotten the world's attention with these tariffs. Is he considering at all potentially holding off on imposing some of them before the deadline, or maybe later, reversing them because he's having these negotiations and having these good talks with other leaders?
The president was asked and answered this yesterday. He said he's not considering an extension or a delay. I spoke to him before this briefing. That was not his mindset. He expects that these tariffs are going to go into effect. And you said something very.
So again, it really doesn't incentivize countries to actually try to negotiate in good faith with Donald Trump because there's no delay. There's no way to avoid the pain or the hurt. Again, I don't see how that's going to incentivize good faith negotiation, but we'll see. One last clip from Fox News reporter Jackie Heinrich.
Deals.
And then yesterday, Goldman Sachs put out a research note. It put the odds of a recession at 45% within the next 12 months, up from 35%. But Peter Navarro guaranteed last night no recession. Does the president agree with him on that? I know that the president in the past has been leery of making definitive statements on that.
I can speak for the president, and I can speak for the optimism that he sees in our economy every day. Again, when you talk about the massive deregulatory efforts that are happening across the board, when you talk about how oil prices are down, gas prices are down.
Oil prices down globally because there is global fear of a recession. That's why oil prices are down, and that's why Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan had their estimates for a recession at 60%. They are also aware that oil is plummeting, but again, it's because of a fear of recession. That's not good. But That's what I mean. Real full-blown North Korea style, Soviet style, like press secretary for a dictator. I'm going to tell you that up is down and down is up and the sky is green, and these two mutually exclusive things somehow can coexist and not break the space-time continuum. That's the sort of shit that we're getting from the Trump White House, and again, we're less than 3 months in. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.